Creating adventures is one of the best parts about being a game master, but if you've never done it before, it can seem intimidating. It looks like there's a million things that you need to remember and be prepared for every possible scenario. After all, this is not a video game. The players aren't limited to a predefined set of options. We game masters should be prepared for everything, right? Well, yeah, but also no. Players will never do exactly what you expect them to. And that's good, because that would be very boring. So how do we do it? How is that the GMs can react to every actions the players take? The answer is simple and obvious to many of you. We improvise. This is important because in knowing that, we can define the way we view our session prep. The main purpose of session prep is to help us improvise and make us feel more comfortable for the upcoming game sessions. In this video, we'll focus on adventure building and more specifically creating the foundation for a good adventure. The Dungeon Master's Guide of 5th edition makes a distinction between location-based and event-based adventures. The location-based adventures send the party on an exploration to the adventuring zone, which becomes the focus of their game. The classic example for this is the long-forgotten dungeon, but it can be pretty much any place you can map. Event-based adventures emphasize a different aspect. The focus is on what the characters and villains do, and what happens as a result. The location is only secondary in importance. If I had to put my gaming style on a scale between the two, it would lean heavily towards the event base. But it's not exactly what you'd find in the Dungeon Master's Guide. The main difference is that I don't use villains. Instead, I use factions. I guess evil factions can still be considered villains, but I will also pay attention to other factions that may be friendly or indifferent to the party. I often refer to it as the bottom-up approach, reason being there is a top-down approach as well, but we'll get there. Let's talk about the steps of building an adventure bottom-up. First, we create our factions. They are the movers and shakers, powerhouses that are directly connected to our story. I use the term factions a bit loosely, as they can be powerful individuals as well. So for example, if we have a villain that the party will eventually fight against, it is considered a faction in our adventure. We'll expand the concept of factions in a future video, but for the sake of adventure building, all we need is a concept and a motive for every faction we create. Let's create an adventure to demonstrate. I don't want to make it unnecessarily complicated, so we'll have 3 factions in our adventure. Unlike fake creatures, so the first faction is going to be a group of dryads. But not the nice kind, they're going to be violent in protecting nature. Their concept is force of nature, and their motive is protecting nature from any who wish to harm it, usually by turning them into fertilizer. We will call them the Crimson Willow. No adventure happens without conflict, so we need an opposition. The Crimson Willow won't attack just anyone. I bet you can think of a few factions who can oppose the Willow. I'll choose the Mercurial Expedition from a campaign I run. Their concept is an alchemist guild. Their motive is to make money and research new applications of alchemy, and possibly new kinds of potions. I'm not sure exactly what they do to earn the enmity of the Willow, but we'll figure it out soon. Sensing this adventure is going to take place near a forest, I want a third neutral faction. A druid circle would be a good choice, but I don't want them to be instantly affiliated with the Willow. So their concept will be gate wardens. Their motive is to guard the entryway to the Fey realm, both from within and without, like a fantasy border patrol, keeping the extra nasty things from entering and helping lost creatures from either side find their way home. Next up is figuring out what was the status quo before the factions started interacting with each other. Did they even know about each other before? If so, what was their relationship like? We are building a power dynamic so we can change it later. For our example, I'm going to decide that the Druid Circle and the Crimson Willow are aware of each other, because the Willows passed through the Circle's portal. They didn't stay for long though, so I'm going to say they're neutral towards each other. The Mercurial Expedition aren't aware of the other two at the beginning. The last and probably longest step is creating a chain of events. Generally speaking, the foundation of any adventure is a series of events that led from the status quo to the point where the player characters are needed. The last event we plan in this chain is the hook for our adventure. Each event has a few properties we need to figure out: the participating faction, the location, the situation, and the outcome. To put it simply, we ask who, where, what happened, and what's changed. To think of events, we need to view the motivations of our factions. and see where they intersect or contradict one another. Back to our example, let's create tension. Looking at what we got, the Mercurial expedition will need to antagonize the Crimson Willow, so they'll need to harm nature in some manner. I don't want to paint them as too greedy, so we'll go for the research motivation. So our first event will be a group of adventuring alchemists that found a flower specimen they've never seen before. They picked a few samples and hurried back to a nearby town to examine them. In picking those flowers, however, they've attracted the attention of the Crimson Willow. Not yet violent at this point, but very aware of our curious alchemists. So we've answered who, where, and what. The outcome is that the Crimson Willow are aware of the alchemists and are unhappy because they've torn plants from the ground. We want the Mercurial expedition to return for more, to push the conflict further. So another outcome is that the Mercurials discover that this flower has a unique alchemical property. It can be used to create a potion of regeneration, which has the power over time to restore lost limbs. A groundbreaking discovery which will help a lot of people and also earn the Mercurials a lot of gold. The next event springs naturally from the last one. The Mercurials send another group to harvest more of that flower. Their job is to gather as much as they can carry. The location is the same, but this time, when they pick the flowers, they are met with an ambush. The group is assaulted by vines as nature itself attacks them. The willows leave no survivors, and they leave the corpses to nourish the land. The druids run into this horrible scene a while later. The putrid smell catches their attention. At this point in time, the druids don't know exactly what happened. By looking at the way the humanoids were slain, they suspect the willows had a part in it, but they don't know who started it or why. They choose, for the time being, to stay out of it. The outcome is a victory for the willows. They will continue protecting nature as they did so far. The druids are still on neutral terms with the willows, but they are now suspicious. The Mercurial expedition is still unaware of the other two factions, but they will eventually notice that the group they sent did not return. The final event is the hook. The Mercurials will hire a group of adventurers to investigate what happened to their research group in the forest. They will not tell them about the flower, however. They want to keep its alchemical properties a secret. This was a short example. We can take that foundation and turn it into an outline for our adventure, building locations, NPCs, and encounters as needed. We'll learn how to do all that in the next video. You've probably noticed that this method really helps in making more believable stories. It can be used to create more complex and multi-layered adventures, but works just as fine for simple ones. The downside of bottom-up approach is that it takes a bit more effort to write all of that down and think about the series of events and their outcome. Another downside is that it's harder to steer your story to your desired destination. If you had a stroke of inspiration for a plot hook, using this method to build a story up to that specific point can feel a bit artificial. So to help with that, we'll now explore a complementary method to adventure building, the top-down approach. If earlier we started from the factions and built the story up to the hook, here we do the exact opposite. We start from the story hook and ask questions to spark inspiration and add more depth. Let's do another short example. This time I want the party to explore a haunted house. So we have a haunted house which the characters are going to explore. Why? Easy answer is they are paid to do so. But maybe we can take a different approach. Maybe it was given to them for free and they want to clear the place so they can move in. I like that one, it kind of reminds me of something I've read in Dragon Heist. Next question we ask is who gave them the house? That person could be a faction if they're related to the story. They might be connected to the reason the house is haunted to begin with. I love the mystery vibe it has. Why is the house haunted? Who's haunting it? The ghost of a murder victim who was buried in the cellar? Or a shadow demon that was summoned by the original owner, perhaps by mistake? For a mystery-themed adventure, the first example would work better, I think. Maybe we can use both. So the previous owners summoned the shadow demon. You tell me why later in the comments, but Shadow Demon killed the person and now we have a ghost and a Shadow Demon in the same house. As you can see, this process is a bit more associative. You throw ideas into space and see what bounces back. When I'm feeling inspired, I find it easier to use the top-down approach, but it's also easy to get lost in thought. My tip is to try to focus your question towards creating factions and events. That will allow us to use the bottom-up approach afterwards to bridge the gaps and continue the story from there. You can swap between the two whenever you feel like one isn't working at the moment. That way you benefit from both of them. A good example for using the top-down approach is when developing plot hooks. When we throw in a plot hook, we're often not entirely sure the players are going to bite. So it makes a lot of sense to develop a rough sketch of an adventure and develop it later if it becomes relevant. Thanks for watching this episode of Tools of the Trade. Part 2 of this video will be out next, in about 2 weeks from now. Then we'll talk about turning the foundation we've created into a skeleton of an adventure, as well as some other tips for writing a campaign's first adventure and how to go beyond it. My name is Aviel Tal. If you like what's going on here, I invite you to check out more videos in this channel. If you want to get notified whenever I publish a new video, subscribe and hit the little bell icon. And don't forget to give me those intricate ghost stories in the comments. You are awesome, keep being awesome, and I'll see you beyond the screen.